Have you ever stood at the edge of your need, staring at bills that mock your faith, and wondered, God, where is my overflow? Listen to me. Your drought does not cancel God's promise. The same God who fed Elijah with ravens and poured oil into a widow's empty jars has not forgotten your name or your need. Sometimes, He waits until the jar is almost dry before He proves that He is your source. Don't you dare think this season of lack defines your future. It's the setup for divine supply. There's a shift coming to your finances, your faith, and your future. And what I'm about to reveal to you about this could shift your perspective forever. But you must watch this video until the very end. Don't skip. There comes a moment in every person's life when the weight of uncertainty presses so heavily on the chest that even breathing feels like work. You look at your situation, your bills, your responsibilities, your dreams, and you start to wonder if there's truly someone beyond all this striving who sees you. You ask yourself, am I running toward abundance, or am I running from fear? Because for most of us, when we talk about financial breakthrough, what we really mean is a desire to feel safe, to know that tomorrow won't devour today. But here's the paradox: the source of your provision cannot be found in the numbers on your paycheck or the digits in your account. The source has never been in the currency of men, but in the consciousness of trust. You see, everything in life moves in rhythm. The ocean tides, the beating of your heart, the rise and fall of economies, the seasons of giving and receiving. We suffer when we mistake the rhythm for the result. You panic when you're in the low tide, but you forget that the same sea that recedes must always return. The spiritual principle is simple. You cannot measure the generosity of God by the temporary appearance of lack. Lack is not punishment, it is an invitation to look deeper, to see where you've placed your faith. Because if your peace can be stolen by the absence of money, then it was never peace. It was dependence. Look at the story of Elijah. The brook that sustained him dried up, and the ravens that once brought him bread no longer came. It would have been easy to assume that God had abandoned him. But what if that drying brook was not a sign of divine neglect, but of divine redirection? The source was never the brook. The source was never the raven. The source was always God. The forms of provision will change, but the provider remains. When you understand this, the fear of running out begins to lose its grip on you. You stop chasing supply and start resting in source. Now, let's be honest. That's not easy. The human mind is wired to cling to what is visible, measurable, predictable. But faith is not built in the predictable. Faith grows in the mystery. It's forged in the places where you don't know how, you don't know when, and you can't see the way, but you trust that there is a way. To live from that trust is to live free. Free from the tyranny of worry. Free from the illusion that security comes from accumulation. Security doesn't come from what you hold in your hand. It comes from what holds you in your spirit. So when you say, I need a financial breakthrough, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, do I need more money? Or do I need a new way of seeing? Because the truth is, when you shift how you see, you shift what you attract. Gratitude multiplies provision. Fear repels it. Anxiety constricts the flow of life. Faith opens it. The world is not against you, it's responding to you. You draw toward you the essence of what you believe. When you live from trust, from generosity, from awareness of divine abundance, life begins to mirror that belief. Imagine the seed buried beneath the soil. It doesn't panic in the dark. It doesn't complain that it cannot see the sun. It simply knows, by some silent intelligence, that everything it needs to grow is already within it. And that's what you must come to understand: your provision, your breakthrough, your abundance is not something waiting for you out there. It is already planted in the soil of your being. The source does not withhold, it invites. The question is, are you listening? So, release the grasp. Let go of the illusion of control. Stop calling yourself broke. And start declaring yourself becoming. Because you are not defined by what you lack, but by what you believe about lack. Every need is simply a hidden opportunity for grace to reveal itself in new form. When you can look at your emptiness and say, even here, I am provided for, you have entered into the rhythm of divine abundance. That's where peace begins. That's where provision flows. That's where the miracle lives. The source has never been money, it has always been meaning. And when you find that, you will never run dry again. There's a strange thing about fear. It doesn't need evidence to feel real. It doesn't ask for facts, only attention. You've seen how quickly it can take hold: one late bill, one uncertain email, one unexpected expense. And suddenly your mind becomes a theater playing endless reels of what could go wrong. Fear feeds on imagination. It grows best in the soil of what if, but faith is of a different nature altogether. It doesn't cancel logic, it transcends it. Faith says, even though I can't see it, I trust that something greater is at work. And until faith speaks louder than fear, you'll always find yourself living in the echo chamber of worry. Fear, after all, is not your enemy. It's simply your teacher, showing you the edges of your trust. You don't silence fear by fighting it, you silence it by understanding it. Fear lives in the future. Faith lives in the now. When you return to this present moment, this breath, this heartbeat, you realize that in this instant you are safe, you are held. You are provided for. It's not the future that threatens you, it's your own projection of it. Faith invites you to release that projection and rest in what is. Remember Peter on the water. He saw Jesus walking toward him. And for a moment, just a moment, he believed. He stepped out of the boat and into the impossible. But then the wind howled and the waves rose. And his focus shifted from presence to problem. The fear he felt didn't come from the water. It came from the shift in perception. Faith is not the absence of storms. It's the calm awareness that the same one who called you onto the water will not let you drown in it. What sank Peter was not the sea, it was doubt. That's how life works, isn't it? You start strong, you say, I believe things are turning around. And then the bills arrive, the delays come, the numbers don't add up, and suddenly, you begin to sink beneath the weight of disbelief. The mind starts whispering, what if this doesn't work? What if I fail again? What if I was never meant to prosper? And before long those whispers become your inner narrative. You start identifying more with fear than with faith. But you see, the universe, God, life itself, it doesn't respond to what you hope for, it responds to what you expect. Fear and faith are both forms of expectation. One expects loss, the other expects provision, and whichever you feed, grows. Now imagine for a moment if your thoughts were seeds, and your attention was sunlight. Where would you shine your light? Because wherever your attention rests, that's what takes root in your life. If you give more energy to fear, replaying the failures, anticipating the lack, you nurture scarcity. But if you water faith, speak gratitude, and move with trust, you cultivate abundance. This isn't spiritual poetry, it's a law of consciousness. Energy follows focus, the heart follows belief, and belief shapes experience. There is power in the spoken word. Every time you declare, I can't, I'm broke, or, this will never work, you're writing a script for your reality. Words carry creative weight. But when you choose to speak faith, to say, I may not see the way, but I know the way exists, you shift the atmosphere. You stop agreeing with limitation and start aligning with possibility. Fear thrives in silence, but faith flourishes in declaration. Speak life, even when life feels heavy. Speak provision even when pockets feel empty. Speak breakthrough even when you see breakdown. Because sound precedes manifestation. The world was spoken into existence, so too will your new reality be. And perhaps the greatest irony is this: faith doesn't guarantee that everything will happen the way you expect. It guarantees that no matter what happens, you'll remain unshaken. It is the quiet confidence that, even in uncertainty, all is unfolding exactly as it should. Fear may visit, but faith gives it no room to stay. Fear may whisper, but faith answers back. So when the storm rises, don't shout at the waves, listen for the calm beneath them. Don't beg for peace as if it were missing. Realize it has been with you all along, waiting to be recognized. The test of faith is not whether you can believe when everything is clear, but whether you can trust when everything is dark. Because true faith is not a light you turn on. It's the fire that never goes out, even in the night. When faith becomes your language, fear loses its vocabulary. Obedience is one of those words that makes people flinch. It sounds old-fashioned, restrictive, almost heavy. But what if obedience isn't about control? What if it's about flow? What if it's the bridge between what you have and what you hope for? Because somewhere between prayer and provision lies an instruction. And too often, we're asking for a miracle while ignoring the direction that would unlock it. The oil only flows when you pour. The widow in the story wasn't told to find more oil. She was told to use what she already had. And that's the spiritual mystery. Provision is often hidden in what you've overlooked. Imagine her moment of decision. The debt collectors were coming. The cupboards were bare. The little jar of oil sat quietly on the shelf, almost mocking her. What good is this small thing? She might have thought. And yet, when the prophet spoke, she listened. Not because it made sense but because it resonated. The divine always speaks in resonance, not reason. Logic says, this is not enough. Faith says, this is all I need. The moment she poured, the oil obeyed a higher law, the law of abundance responding to movement. Stillness in faith is not idleness, it's alignment. But once the heart moves, the hand must follow. You see, obedience isn't about subservience, it's about participation in creation. It's the willingness to act when understanding hasn't yet arrived. Every miracle in Scripture, and in life, hinges on that moment when someone to move before they saw results. Noah built before the rain. Abraham walked before the map. Peter cast his net one more time of failure. The same principle hums beneath your own story. Nothing flows until you move. The oil doesn't multiply while you're watching. It multiplies while you're pouring. And that's the paradox we resist. We want assurance before action, supply before surrender, certainty before obedience. But the divine rhythm works the other way around. The door opens when you knock, not when you stand thinking about it. The sea parts when you step forward, not when you analyze the odds. Obedience is not blind, it's deeply aware. It senses that the universe bends toward trust, that movement attracts provision, that grace fills the gaps only motion reveals. When you withhold obedience, you delay your own expansion. You hold back what could have multiplied because you're waiting for perfect clarity. But clarity often comes after commitment. That's why the oil flowed only as long as there were vessels to fill. When she stopped bringing jars, the oil stopped flowing. What a lesson! God never runs out of oil, we just run out of space to receive it. The limitation isn't in heaven, it's in the container we offer. Each act of obedience enlarges your capacity. Each yes creates more room for abundance to move. It's not just a financial principle. It's a spiritual law. When you give time, energy, generosity, forgiveness, whatever it is, the act itself opens channels that fear had closed. You might not see it immediately, but the very act of releasing what's in your hand shifts what's in your heart. You prove to life that you trust its rhythm. You step into partnership with creation rather than resistance against it. So ask yourself, What instruction have you been delaying because it doesn't make sense? What small jar have you dismissed as insignificant? Maybe it's a talent you've buried, a conversation you've avoided, a step you've postponed because you're waiting to feel ready. The truth is, readiness rarely comes. Readiness is born through action. You learn the rhythm of faith by stepping into it. Every time you obey a quiet prompting, every time you follow the nudge of your spirit, you move from the realm of wishing into the realm of becoming. And when you do, the oil starts to flow again, resources align, doors open, not because you forced them, but because you synchronized yourself with the order of things. So don't wait for proof before you pour. Don't wait for the jar to overflow before you start filling it. The miracle is not in the amount, it's in the motion. And once you move, the divine can move with you. The oil only flows for those who dare to pour. Debt has a peculiar way of whispering to the soul. It's not just numbers on a statement or balances on a screen. It's the subtle weight pressing behind your thoughts, the quiet ache of owing, the sense that something in your life is perpetually unfinished. You begin to measure time by due dates instead of dreams. And soon your spirit starts to live on credit as well, borrowing hope from tomorrow just to survive today. But what if I told you that debt is more than a financial condition? It's a spiritual metaphor. It reveals where we've exchanged peace for pressure, wisdom for want, and faith for the illusion of control. We often speak of money as though it exists separately from our inner life, but money is simply energy given form. It reflects your relationship with trust, with value, with surrender. When you spend beyond your means, it's not just a fiscal decision. It's a spiritual confession that you do not yet believe that what you have is enough. Debt begins not in the ledger, but in the heart that says, "If only I had more." It's the longing for security dressed as accumulation, and like all illusions, it demands payment, with interest. Breaking the spirit of debt, then, is not merely about financial strategy. It's about liberation of consciousness. It's about remembering that you are not owned by what you owe. You see, there's a reason so many spiritual teachings, ancient and modern, speak about release. Forgive us our debts, the prayer says, as we forgive our debtors. The wisdom is layered. It reminds us that debt is cyclical. What you hold against others, life holds against you. When you release resentment, you open the same channel through which financial release flows. The universe mirrors your generosity. Forgive, and you make room for freedom to move through every corner of your life, including your finances. But release must be paired with wisdom. Many people pray for a breakthrough while repeating the very patterns that caused the bondage. They ask for deliverance from debt, yet continue to live out of alignment with their values. The miracle cannot settle where discipline is absent. God, or the divine, does not waste provision on patterns that would only recreate the problem. That's why prayer for financial freedom must be partnered with clarity. Clarity about priorities, purpose, and stewardship. You cannot pray for overflow while leaking through waste. Wisdom is not restriction, it's rhythm. It teaches you when to save, when to give, when to sow, and when to wait. The spirit of debt thrives on chaos and impulse, but abundance flows through order and intention. You don't fight debt by fear. You transcend it by awareness. Awareness transforms spending into gratitude, earning into service, and giving into participation with the divine exchange that sustains all life. You begin to see money not as something you possess, but as something that passes through you, carrying the imprint of your consciousness wherever it goes. There's a story told of a man who owed more than he could repay. He went before the king and begged for mercy. And the king, moved by compassion, forgave the entire debt. But the man, instead of rejoicing in grace, left and demanded repayment from someone who owed him a fraction. The moment he did, He lost the freedom he'd just been given. Why? Because he failed to understand that release is reciprocal. What you refuse to extend, you forfeit to experience. The lesson is not moral but metaphysical. You cannot hold both bitterness and blessing in the same hand. One must be released for the other to remain. And so, if you wish to break the spirit of debt, begin by releasing, not just money, but mindset. Release the shame of past mistakes, the guilt of mismanagement, the fear that there will never be enough. Begin to treat your finances as a living dialogue with the divine. Ask not only for more, but for wisdom in what you already have. Gratitude is the beginning of mastery, and stewardship is its fulfillment. Every dollar, every decision, every delay carries a message. Learn to listen. Because ultimately debt is not the enemy. It's the mirror. It shows you where energy has been trapped, where lessons are still unfolding, where you've mistaken ownership for identity. When you learn from it, it loses its power. When you forgive it, it releases its hold. And when you trust again in the sufficiency of the source that breathes through you, you will find that freedom is not something you earn. It's something you remember. True deliverance begins not when the balance reaches zero, but when your heart does. There's a quiet revolution that happens inside you when you begin to see the world not through the eyes of scarcity, but through the eyes of abundance. Most people never make that shift. They live in a constant tension of not enough money, not enough time, not enough opportunity, not enough of me. And what they don't realize is that scarcity isn't a condition of the world, it's a condition of the mind. There has always been enough sun to warm the world, enough water to carve mountains, enough life to fill the seas. The universe itself operates on overflow. The only reason we experience lack is because we've convinced ourselves we're separate from the flow that sustains everything. Scarcity thinking begins the moment we forget our connection to Source. It's that subtle thought that whispers, if someone else wins, I lose. It's the reflex that says, hold tighter, there may not be more. But the divine economy doesn't work like that. You cannot hoard light, and you cannot store air. The more you try to possess what is meant to flow, the more it slips through your fingers. Life is not something you control. It's something you cooperate with. And abundance is simply the natural rhythm of cooperation with creation itself. Consider nature. The tree doesn't hold back its fruit, waiting to see if it will have enough for next season. It gives. Because giving is part of its design. The clouds don't ration the rain, they pour when it's time. The ocean doesn't measure how many waves it can spare, it just moves. And somewhere in that simple rhythm is the secret you've been looking for. Abundance is not a result. It's a relationship. When you align your inner world with that rhythm of giving and receiving, you begin to live as the tree, as the cloud, as the ocean. You stop grasping and start flowing, you stop competing and start creating. But make no mistake, scarcity thinking disguises itself well. It often sounds like practicality. I need to save, I can't risk, I'll give when I have more. Yet, this kind of caution can become a cage. The more you fear lack, the more lack defines you. When you act from fear, you tell life you don't trust it, and life responds accordingly. But when you act from faith, when you give with an open hand, even in small ways, you send a message into the fabric of creation. I trust the source that gives. And that trust becomes the channel through which more flows back. This doesn't mean recklessness. It means awareness. To think abundantly is not to spend carelessly, it is to see clearly. It is to know that generosity and wisdom can coexist, that giving and grounding are not opposites but partners. When you live from that place, money stops being a master and becomes a mirror, reflecting a mindset, your faith, your capacity to receive. Because the truth is, abundance can't reach a heart closed in fear. You must open to it, not chase it. You must live as though it's already yours. And in that living, it arrives. The mind trained in scarcity will always look for proof. It will say, I'll believe in abundance when I see it. But the mind awakened to truth says, I'll see abundance when I believe in it. And when that shift happens, the evidence follows. Opportunities begin to emerge. Not because they weren't there before, but because now you can finally see them. The lens of lack has been replaced by the vision of possibility. The same world, the same circumstances, but an entirely different experience. When you start to think and act from abundance, you also begin to attract others who do the same. The generous find the generous. The open-hearted find the open-handed. Life begins to arrange itself around your new vibration of trust. You start to feel what it means to be in flow, not forcing outcomes but allowing them. You realize that wealth is not merely having. It's being in harmony with what is. And when that harmony takes root, you understand that the truest riches were never stored in banks or vaults. They were always hidden in awareness, waiting to be remembered. Scarcity says, there isn't enough. Abundance says, there's always more where that came from. One constricts, the other expands. One lives in fear, the other in faith. The choice between them is the choice between survival and serenity. True abundance begins the moment you stop asking, what do I lack? And start realizing, I already have everything I need. There's something deeply mysterious about the act of giving when it costs you something. It's easy to be generous when your cup is overflowing, when everything feels secure and predictable. But the true alchemy of life happens in the moments when you give from your need, not your surplus. That's the kind of giving that changes the giver. It's a strange paradox. When you release something precious in a season of struggle, you don't end up with less. You create space for the infinite to move through you. The seed that's buried in the earth doesn't die, it transforms. In the same way, the offering you release in faith doesn't leave your life. It multiplies in unseen places until it returns in ways you could never have imagined. There's a quiet story buried in the Gospels that holds a profound truth. A small boy stood among a hungry crowd with nothing but 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. In the eyes of the world, that offering was insignificant. But in the hands of the divine, it became the source of overflow. What's powerful is not the size of what he gave but the heart with which he gave it. He didn't wait to see how the miracle would unfold. He simply trusted that what he had was enough when placed in higher hands. That's the secret of faith in the midst of lack, to act as though you already believe the multiplication has begun. You see, when you sow in the season of struggle, you defy the logic of fear. Fear says, hold on to what you have. Faith says, release it. It was never yours to keep. The moment you give, you declare to the universe that your supply does not end with you. You become a participant in the great cycle of flow that sustains all life. That's why everything in nature gives. The tree gives shade, the river gives water, the earth gives fruit, the sun gives warmth. The only creature that hesitates to give is the one who's forgotten it's part of the same rhythm. Now, this doesn't always mean money or material things. Sometimes the seed you're asked to sow is forgiveness, when bitterness feels easier. Sometimes it's patience, when frustration feels justified. Sometimes it's time, when you feel too busy or drained. But the principle is always the same. Give what you wish to receive. Life reflects the nature of your giving. If you sow generosity, you attract generosity. If you sow fear, you harvest scarcity. Everything begins with the energy of what you release. There's a subtle beauty in this. Giving is not loss, it's alignment. It reminds you that you are not the source but the channel. And when the channel opens, flow increases. The universe cannot fill a closed hand. So the question is not whether God will provide. It's whether you will make room. Your next breakthrough may be waiting on your willingness to pour out what you still think you need. Because what you cling to becomes heavy. But what you give away becomes light. Think of a musician playing a beautiful melody. Every note they play is released into the air, never to return in the same form. But the more they release, the richer the music becomes. That's what giving is like. You are composing harmony with the universe through the rhythm of release. It is both art and faith. A surrender that creates something greater than itself. And perhaps the deepest truth of all is that giving heals the illusion of separation. It reminds us that we are all connected in this sacred dance of exchange. What leaves your hand may feed someone's hunger, lift someone's despair, ignite someone's hope, and somehow, mysteriously, that same energy finds its way back to you. Different in form but identical in essence. Because abundance never leaves the circle, it only changes direction. So when you find yourself in a season of struggle, don't retreat into fear. Don't let scarcity close your spirit. Open your hands, open your heart, and release something into the flow of life. That one act of courage could be the key that unlocks the next wave of provision. The miracle isn't in the amount you give. It's in the faith that moves you to give it. The seed planted in struggle becomes the harvest of strength. There's a sacred mystery in learning how to praise before the blessing arrives. Most of us are taught to celebrate as after the victory. To lift our hands when the miracle is visible, to give thanks once the debt is cleared. The job is secured, the need is met. But the deeper truth is this: real faith celebrates while the ground is still dry. While the evidence is still invisible, while the heart still trembles. Because praise, in its truest form, is not a reaction, it's a revelation. It's the recognition that even in the silence of waiting, God or life itself is already moving beneath the surface. When you praise before the provision, you step out of the limited logic of cause and effect and into the timeless rhythm of trust. You're no longer saying, "I'll be grateful when things work out," but, "I'm grateful, because they already are." It's a complete shift in perception. Praise is not the end of the process, it's the ignition of it. The moment you open your mouth to bless the unseen, you align yourself with the flow of divine activity that's always been in motion. You're not convincing heaven to act, you're tuning yourself to its frequency. Think about the walls of Jericho. Those walls didn't fall because Joshua's army had superior weapons or a clever strategy. They fell when the people lifted their voices and praised before the walls crumbled. That's not poetic metaphor. That's spiritual law. Sound precedes manifestation. When you speak gratitude into the emptiness, you create resonance. And that resonance rearranges the invisible patterns of life around you. The walls don't respond to logic, they respond to vibration. Praise shakes the structure of limitation until it collapses under its own illusion. What happens inside you when you praise in the midst of difficulty is even more profound. Praise expands your consciousness beyond the narrow corridor of worry. It loosens the grip of anxiety and rewires the mind from fear to expectancy. Every breath of gratitude lifts you closer to clarity, to calm, to communion. You start to realize that joy was never the reward for the outcome. It was the power that produced it. The act of praising transforms your atmosphere. You could be standing in the same circumstances, surrounded by the same chaos, and yet feel completely different. Not because the situation changed, but because you did. When the soul praises, it declares independence from circumstance. It says, "You cannot define me by what I see, because I am anchored in what I know." That kind of faith disarms despair. It breaks the heaviness that debt, loss, or delay tries to impose. You cannot worship and worry at the same time, one dissolves the other. Praise pulls you out of the gravitational field of fear and lifts you into the orbit of grace. It's not denial of the struggle. It's defiance against hopelessness. You are saying to the darkness, "You can't silence me because even now, I see light." And yet, this kind of praise doesn't always sound like a song. Sometimes it's a whisper in the middle of the night. A quiet, "thank you." When the bills are unpaid, a tear shed in trust that something unseen is still working on your behalf. That whisper is enough. Because praise isn't about volume, it's about vibration. The power lies not in how loudly you speak, but in how deeply you believe. Every moment you choose gratitude over grumbling, you sow a seed into the soil of faith. Those seeds grow quietly like roots beneath the ground, preparing the harvest you can't yet see. That's why gratitude in advance is the most powerful prayer you can pray. It declares, "I trust the rhythm of life even when I can't feel its beat." And the universe, ever responsive, begins to mirror that trust back to you. Eventually, the provision comes. The healing, the opportunity, the breakthrough, it all arrives. And when it does, you realize something beautiful. Your praise didn't bring the miracle, it revealed it. The provision was always there, waiting for your awareness to rise high enough to meet it. That's the secret hidden in plain sight. Praise doesn't make God move, it makes you move into alignment with what has already been done. So, in the waiting, in the uncertainty, in the long night of not yet, lift your voice anyway. Don't wait for the walls to fall. Shout until they do. Because in every act of praise, you're not just expressing gratitude, you're releasing creation. The heart that can praise in lack will never remain there for long. There comes a moment when the soul begins to sense that something is shifting. Not outside of you but within. You feel it in the quiet hours, when the noise dies down and the deeper current of life begins to speak. It whispers that the long season of strain, the weight of worry, the constant battle for stability, is nearing its end. You've proven, you've waited. And perhaps for a time, you thought heaven was silent. But the silence was never absence, it was gestation. The breakthrough you've been yearning for has been forming in the unseen, waiting for you to grow into the version of yourself capable of receiving it. We often imagine overflow as something external, a sudden windfall, an unexpected opportunity, a miraculous intervention. And yes, sometimes it appears that way. But real overflow begins internally. It begins the moment your awareness expands beyond survival and into surrender. When you stop pleading for provision and start trusting that it's already on its way, the flow begins to move differently. You're no longer tugging at the river. You're floating in it. What once felt like a chase becomes a current that carries you. And the most extraordinary thing happens: life starts responding to your peace instead of your panic. Every spiritual tradition, every wise teacher, has echoed this truth in different ways. That what you seek is not somewhere else. The abundance you crave, the freedom you long for, the ease you dream of, it's not hidden in the future. It's locked inside your present awareness. You've been waiting for doors to open, not realizing the key was always in your own pocket. The moment you release your resistance to lack, life rushes in to fill the space with possibility. Overflow is not about accumulation, it's about alignment. It's when your inner world begins to match the frequency of what you've been asking for. Imagine a cup placed under a waterfall. It doesn't strain to be filled, it simply remains open. That's what surrender looks like. That's what trust feels like. Your only task is to stay open, to doubt a little less, to expect a little more. To live as though abundance is not coming you, but through you. The moment you shift from anxiety to gratitude, you become like that open cup, ready for the divine to pour freely. The same force that orchestrates the tides, the turning of planets, The breath in your lungs begins to orchestrate your provision with precision. And yet, overflow isn't meant for hoarding. When blessings arrive, they're not proof of superiority but invitations to stewardship. The more you receive, the more you're called to release. The rhythm of divine abundance has always been give and receive, inhale and exhale. The ocean gives its waves without fear of running dry. The sun shines without asking for applause. And you too are meant to live in that effortless circulation of generosity. To give is not to lose. It's to keep the current alive. The moment you try to hold the flow, it stops being flow. Overflow must move, or it stagnates. Sometimes, what we call miracles are simply moments when our hearts finally catch up with the truth that was always there, that we are cared for, sustained, and supported by a power far greater than our striving. When the mind stops struggling to figure everything out, when the hands unclench, when the heart finally exhales, provision appears. The chains of debt loosen, opportunities align, resources emerge. But even then, the miracle isn't the money, or the promotion, or the open door. The miracle is the realization that you were never separate from the source to begin with. That's why overflow is not a destination, it's an awakening. It's not something you get, it's something you remember. You begin to walk differently, not because circumstances have changed, but because you have. You no longer beg for blessing, you expect it, not out of arrogance but awareness. You realize that you are the vessel through which the divine expresses abundance on earth. And as you live from that realization, everything you touch begins to multiply. Peace deepens, Doken, life expands. So now, as this prayer rises and this moment unfolds, let go of the fear that has disguised itself as practicality. Release the belief that you must earn what grace has already given. You are not waiting for abundance. It has been waiting for you to remember who you are. Overflow isn't coming, it's already here.